Welcome everyone. This is the lecture which corresponds to Chapter 1 in your Ryan text. Before watching this lecture, you will read Chapter 1. This chapter and Chapter 2 provide you with information on the history of occupational therapy and the various factors that led to the development of the occupational therapy assistant. In order to have a full understanding of what OT is and what it means to be an OTA, you must understand the history. You will find that many of the early concepts are relevant in some form today. This part of your course is addressing course competency number 2, which states that you must be able to summarize the importance of the history and philosophy base of OT. We will start with the content from Chapter 1. In this part of the lecture, we will focus on the development of the occupational therapy profession. The founding of OT began with the moral treatment movement in the 1700s. This movement was based on certain principles. These included the belief that all humans have the innate ability to reason. Humans have a moral obligation to engage in purposeful work, and the belief that all humans should be treated with compassion. Philip Pennell believed that moral treatment meant treating the patient's emotions. He thought that the emotionally disturbed patient's emotions were out of balance, resulting in a loss of reason. Pennell used occupation to divert mentally ill patients' minds from unhealthy emotions and to develop their physical skills. Pennell pioneered the idea of a therapeutic farm. By engaging in meaningful farm occupations, patients develop self-respect, self-esteem, and dignity. William Tuke was another founder of the moral treatment movement. At that time, patients were housed in asylums, often in deplorable conditions. Tuke believed that patients should be treated with kindness and consideration. Tuke used engagement in occupation as a means for patients to maintain control over their disorder. Keep in mind, this was before the advent of psychotropic medications to manage psychotropic symptoms. The moral treatment movement continued into the 1800s, but other public concerns, like the Civil War, became the focus rather than humane public care of the insane. With the start of the 20th century, in other words, the 1900s, came the emergence of several social experiments and the reemergence of the moral treatment movement, which eventually led to the development of occupational therapy as a concept and as a profession. At the Hull House, several educational, social, and investigative programs were provided to serve immigrants and the poor. Out of this came the first training program for occupational workers, which was developed by Eleanor Clark Slagle. Susan Tracy began using occupation with acutely physically ill patients. Up until this time, the primary focus was the mentally ill. Tracy believed that activities could have a therapeutic effect. When patients engaged in activity, it had a healing effect. With therapeutic activity, the patient is the product, not the article he or she makes. George Edward Barton was concerned with the re-education of convalescents. Barton had contracted tuberculosis, which left him with permanent disability. He believed that hospitals had a greater responsibility to their patient beyond discharge. He was concerned with the numerous challenges that patients faced after illness or injury and the barriers to their participation in a productive life. He established the Consolation House, where physically disabled persons were assisted in reestablishing skills through re-education in order to find an occupation to which he would be best fitted. William Dutton believed that patients made better progress if they were focused on regular and healthful patterns of occupation. He believed in a judicious regimen of activity, where the patient's attention is diverted from unpleasant subjects, the patient's physical and mental skills are re-educated and improved, hobbies are developed as a safety valve, decreasing the likelihood of reoccurrence of mental illness, and activities help the patient gain proficiency in a craft. In addition to her work at the Hull House, Eleanor Clark Slagle was founder of Habit Training. Habit Training was a 24-hour-long re-education program designed to overcome disorganized habits developed during years of hospitalization in psychiatric patients. After completing Habit Training, the patient progressed to later stages of treatment with increasing freedom, responsibility, and socialization. Slagle believed that OT must be a well-balanced program of rest, play, occupation, and exercises. Adolph Meyer was a physician and later psychiatrist. He employed Eleanor Clark Slagle to develop the occupation programs at Johns Hopkins University and the Henry Phipps Clinic. He believed that the only way to achieve balance in the rhythms of daily life is by actual doing and actual practice. At this time, about 1914 to 1917, many of the main occupational practitioners advocated for an establishment of a national organization to share information about this new line of treatment. The first meeting was held in 1917. In 2017, the American Occupational Therapy Association celebrated their 100th anniversary. Many of the principles established early on in OT still exist in some form today. Purposeful work and leisure. To engage the patient, you must find out what is important to them, what their interests are. This is what is meaningful and purposeful to them. The next principle that still is present today, involvement of the mind and body. You cannot divide a person into parts, such as their mental health and their physical health. Mind and body interact. This seems a standard assumption today, but back then, when the AOT was established, the OTs were unique in this perspective. The next principle, occupational therapy is a learning process. OT was educational in nature, with the outcome of instruction being changes in behavior and performance. Practitioner's personal qualities. The essential qualities an OT practitioner must have in their interactions with patients include honesty, frankness, wisdom, adaptability, and other qualities. This is related to a concept called therapeutic use of self. We will talk about this concept later in this class and next term in psychosocial practice. In fact, course competency number 9, which you can find in Blackboard on the course outcome summary, is that you demonstrate therapeutic use of self. When using an activity therapeutically, it is not about the sweater that is knitted or the craft that is made. It is about the changes inspired in the person. This quote talks about this and seems to reflect this rather well. I think it's important as you're learning to become an OT that you're able to advocate for the profession and understand this very important concept. This concludes this part of the lecture. Your next lecture will be on Chapter 2 in Ryan.